All right, we are starting week 5 today, and I'm going to try to get week 6 video up a little earlier this week. Don't let that confuse you. If you're not working ahead, that's not a problem, but I have a couple people who are taking some vacations and are liking to work ahead, so I'm going to do that, but don't let it confuse you. Don't feel overwhelmed by that, okay? For week 5, first of all, I want to compliment you on all the great questions I had on last week's wiki and just the way that you're thinking so intensely and critically about this. That's really good stuff. I'm really excited to see your end product. Um, this week, what we're looking at is the theme of teaching writing, which obviously is the whole course, but we're getting into the building of what Outwell calls mini lessons, and I like this concept a lot. I'm not going to ever say that there's only one right way to effectively teach English, but I love the flexibility and of the mini lesson and the compatibility with multiple age groups, and I'm just really excited about this. So I'm just want to walk you through the readings first of all, because it's our core text. I'd like you to read chapters 2 and chapter 6 carefully. Chapter 2 talks about teaching reading, and I'm not really isolating reading for this course, but like I mentioned last week, I have found that teaching separate reading and writing workshops helps keep me as an instructor accountable to making sure I'm teaching in balance with the two. And but I did find when I taught in a brick and mortar school and I had lots of preps, meaning that I had 5 different classes I was teaching, that I would chunk it sometimes where I would do like 2 weeks of reading, 2 weeks of writing. And I think either model is fine, but just kind of putting that out there. Okay, faculty focus article. 2 articles this week that I'd like you to at least scan through. The Instructor's Challenge, moving students beyond opinions to critical thinking. And I put that in here this week because I like, even though this is again directed at college students, I like thinking this way for our younger students, even our elementary students, beyond giving a pat answer or the expected answer, really teaching them to think critically, to analyze their own thoughts and opinions, to back themselves up, to support their ideas, to go beyond the first answer that comes out of their head, into more creativity. One of you mentioned being in the Power Pen contest, and I remember being a judge of that contest, and it's a creative writing contest in Ohio if you've not heard of it, for junior high. And one of the big things I noted is that the very best writing were the students who didn't just, it wasn't the instinctive response. We tend to, Family Feud style survey says there are some answers that just come to our mind in an answer to certain questions, but the responses that push beyond that initial, oh, here's what this is, are the more critical thinking ones and the ones we really want to build our students towards. I also think this includes like global thinking and thinking beyond the walls of the classroom, even working with other departments, working with other school systems, and a lot of technology can allow us to do that with much greater ease than mailing a bunch of pen pal letters. So some things to think about. The other thing, speaking of technology, again, this is a faculty focus article, but I want to explore this looking at the flippable classroom. It's hard to be everywhere at once, and a lot of you have talked about really valuing that one-on-one conferencing time as a student and as an instructor. And how do you do that and still manage the rest of the classroom? What if you set up a station in your classroom that was your mini lesson video, so that you're not locked into your mini lesson, but they're watching you at one station, or even each of them watching you on a device, or a classroom set of devices where they can pause, go back, even go back to that station if they've forgotten what you've said. And you're teaching them to be independent learners this way too, where they're not always coming back to you. I'm guessing some of you do that. Not that my little videos here are that wow, but that you probably do have moments where you're like, oh, I think she mentioned that in the video, I'm gonna go check into that, before you email me. Because a lot of you have quoted me in my video, you said this in the video, did you mean, okay, great learning opportunity for your students to be independent learners. So flippable classroom, and there's also, I think, some drawbacks to flipping. You can't, it's not just swapping out the video for, you can't just, sometimes it doesn't gain anything. So what are you gaining, I guess is what I'm saying. Just creating videos isn't gaining anything. What is your reasoning? This site is awesome. Okay, you have very few readings this week. This site right here, have fun. It's really going to feed your wiki for the next 2 weeks. And I do have, if you want to look ahead, there are some more resources next week about just graphite's another one that you could spend hours exploring. Okay, but I think the main one I want you to look at this week is the NWP Writing Fix website. So enjoy that. It's going to feed a lot of your ideas for your wiki. So let's go ahead and talk about what we're talking about this week. For the discussion board, I want you to kind of just explore some of the tricky writing things that we encounter in writing classrooms. So create a potential scenario. You can use one of my ideas here or your own. And how are you going to respond? What are you going to do about it? Okay? Or create your own. Maybe you know of one that really happened, or you've already experienced one in some of your observations in student teaching and whatnot. Okay, or even as a student. For your blog this week, this is going to be just some practice. This is something that you could actually add to your wiki. Craft a sample response to one of your writing tasks developed in your wiki. A lot of you said you want to model out to your students, you want to show them your writing, you want to have sample writings for them. Ta-da! This blog does it for you. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to put ourselves in our own hot seat. I'm going to ask you then to use a reflection tool, either one that you've created or one that you've found, and apply that reflection tool to your sample response. And then when you reply, so that's good. So you're going to write, and then you're going to reflect on your own writing. So you're going to respond to any one of your, it can be your minute writing, it can be your formative writing, it can be your summative writing, whatever. So maybe it's some really creative stuff out there. Give a sample, write a reflection on your sample, and then in your reply to others, use one of your editing tools and be the student editor, or use an editing approach that you've explored. Maybe it's just a narrative approach where you're actually writing a letter to another student. Maybe it's a worksheet that you want to attach and give them little marks. Be the student editor and for one another. And I think then that if you want to, you could include that whole package in your wiki, so that later on when you're teaching out, you can pull this stuff and say, okay, this is what this is going to look like, guys. Here's my writing, here's my reflection, and here's what another student said about my writing. Okay, and you have that package for them, especially as you're starting out and trying to teach them how to do all of these steps. So blog is a little bit longer this time. But I think it's going to feed into the wiki really nicely. In fact, you can go ahead and slide it right into the wiki. Wiki is a little bit more involved, and I want to explain a few things in this. We're going to use the 4 writing tasks that you started that you turned in this past week. And I want you to review the Common Core standards. I've already challenged you to break down the Common Core standard. If it says students will show inferred meaning or whatever, you're going to have to teach inference, right? You can't just assume they know how to infer. Or if it's asking students to write well-developed pieces, what is a well-developed piece? I remember when I first saw the first draft of the Common Core, and one of them said, write a cogent piece of writing. And we're all looking at each other going, huh, cogent? Okay, I mean... There's some inferred skills, implied skills in these that you're going to have to break down for students. So how are you going to do that? I would like you to create 4 mini lessons. You do not have to use a PowerPoint. You can use a Prezi. You don't have to use a Prezi or a PowerPoint. But how are you going to teach these four skills that are needed for your 4 mini lessons? If you create a Prezi or a PowerPoint, don't create slides that you're just going to read off to students unless it's something that you want them to do independently at a station, and then preface it that way. Make sure that your language is consistent. This is teaching notes for students, not teaching notes for you, unless you're making teaching notes for you, and that's fine, but I'm not sure why you would need a PowerPoint for yourself. Okay, but it's fine if you want to make teaching notes for yourself. Basically, what I'm asking you to do is create some way, and maybe it's an activity. Maybe it's not a PowerPoint at all. Maybe it's an activity. For example, Maybe I want to teach thesis writing, and I'm going to teach it using templates, and I'm going to give a whole worksheet of templates that we're going to walk through on my smartboard if I have one. I never had one. I taught brick and mortar 13 years, didn't have one until I went to Capital, and I wouldn't exactly call Capital all that progressive in our technology sometimes, but it's getting there, but you know what I'm saying. There's some rooms I teach in at Capital that I swear they put me in the closet, okay? Like there's nothing in the room except for maybe an old school chalkboard. But I can put a template up on a whiteboard and have students. One of the things I love to do, I think I mentioned this before, so excuse my random repeats, is once we've done something that we're reading and then responding to, is put different ideas from the readings all over the room, like graffiti walls, and then I have my students walk around and add a thought to each one and a thought to somebody else. So it's kind of like a living discussion board. And then from there, we write. So that could be my mini lesson, where I'm doing some sort of activity with students that's going to teach out. But how am I going to connect that activity? I mean, I can't just send them to seats and go, okay, now you're ready to write. Okay, so explain what you're going to do, or have some sort of tool created. Either one is fine. I'm not the PowerPoint judge, okay? But I do know that something, even if you do a PowerPoint, it needs to engage students. Very key, engaging students. And that's this next part. What's going to draw them in more than me? We're not the holder of all knowledge, injecting knowledge into our students. We're interacting with them, pulling out from them what they already know, helping them to latch on to the things they know so that they can build on them and increase their aptitudes and competencies in writing, right? Okay, so this part B here. Create tools that students will need for the self-reflection, self-evaluation, feedback stuff, okay? Be your own judge on this. Again, somebody said, do I have to have a different rubric for each writing prompt? No. You also don't have to have a different self-reflection or self-evaluation, but do make sure it fits. Can you find one that's made that's like perfect? Yes, just make sure you can still write on it, so that you can like maybe highlight to give feedback to students. You might also want to consider some guidelines, sample writings, teaching tools. Again, this blog fits into the wiki. You don't have to have a sample writing for every step, but what I'm asking you to do is to basically take what you've already outlined for 4 writing tasks, and now, I kind of hate this expression, I'm going to use it, flesh it out, shade it in with the things you actually need. Imagine yourself teaching it as a lesson. What do you need to hand out? What do you need to show? What do you need to teach out? What do you need? What supplies? I mean, even create supply lists. If you're going to do an activity, what are you going to need? So that you have this like package, so that you could literally be given a job the day before school starts, because that happens, and it will happen to one of you probably, and you have something that you can go right into. You're like, okay, I've got this. We're going to start here. Okay. And then because we're going to be sharing these out, would you also include a description of what the writing process will look like for each of the 4 tasks? So like show us how you're going to teach this out. Like say, okay, this PowerPoint would be used on the first day of the lesson to set up the concept of brainstorming, and we're going to practice all different kinds of brainstorming. I'm going to have different stations, or I'm going to have a timer set, and we're going to do I'm going to have a PowerPoint set up, and each PowerPoint's going to have a different idea and a sample of the different types of brainstorming that you do or pre-writing that you can do, and then I'm going to have students choose one and go off by themselves and write, something like this. I'm going to try to switch gears here just for a moment and get you a little interview when we're talking about engagement. Okay, so for the next minute, I'm going to put my upcoming freshman on the hot seat. He's going to, for 45 seconds, tell you about Shark Tank, which was a writing concept I thought you might enjoy.
So like it was, if any of you have seen the show, if anyone has seen the show Shark Tank, it's like you present a new invention to the sharks who are millionaires who may invest in your company. So you have to write like a persuasive essay and have to do a whole pitch and convince these sharks to buy your product or invest in your company.
And then you did peer judges, right?
Yeah, and then people judged and voted, and the top presenter